If you're looking for a way to get centered, to find your center, to connect to the divine, or simply if you're just grappling with a question, you might want to consider working with a labyrinth. Labyrinths are archetypal and spiritual tools that have been used for millennia, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, from the large walking labyrinths to the small tabletop finger labyrinths. So we are here tonight talking about the magical world of labyrinths. So come inside and take a deep dive with us. Merry meet, I'm Aislin, and this is Ask Aislin, and I am joined tonight by my dear friend, Revered Tippy Yunnan. He is a librarian from Harvard University and a graduate student in spirituality at Merrimack College. So welcome to the show, Tippy.
Thank you.
You are welcome. So we are here tonight talking about labyrinths. In particular, Tippy has recently completed a paper on labyrinths for his course, Spirituality.
Topics and methods in spirituality.
Topics and methods in spirituality. And he is going to be sharing with us some of his findings as we go further into the show. But before we begin, we're just saying hello to those who are joining us live. Merry meet. I see that Jamie's in the chat and Nancy's here and Kurt and Rose. Merry meet. We can at least see those people in the chat. So welcome to those who are joining us. Make sure to leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in the show if you like what you hear. It helps us get it into the feed of more people. And of course, if you're live with us, we will be having our Q&A throughout the episode and at the end. So make sure to leave questions and comments, and we'll be watching the feed as we go. So we're going to dive in. As you can see tonight, we are not in my home studio in Los Angeles. We're actually here in Boston. And rather than skip this week's episode, I thought it would be a good time for us to open up this new show and discuss labyrinths. So I'm excited for this. Tippy pulled an all-nighter on the night that I arrived and didn't even make it to the airport in time to get me, because he was pulling the all-nighter, but it was for him to finish his paper, and that is what he's going to share with us tonight. Okay, so why don't we dive in? I've got some questions, and we'll just see where the episode goes. He has been, as I mentioned, working on this paper for some time. So why don't we start off with what is a labyrinth, especially for our viewers who aren't sure what a labyrinth is.
Sure. Well, a labyrinth, to begin with, is not a maze. A maze, you have multiple paths, whether it's on the ground, something you walk through, or something you work with in a workbook, or you find carved into a wall. You have multiple paths, only one of which will lead you from the entrance to the exit. It's basically a puzzle to be solved. And a labyrinth is unicursal, meaning there's only one course, one path. And typically nowadays, I think the one you would most often see is based on the model that you find in Chartres Cathedral outside of Paris. It's the round, spirally labyrinth, and you walk your way around to the center, and you walk your way out, of course, with a lot of twists and turns, but it is only one path. There's really no way to be lost.
So what is why do people think of mazes when they think of labyrinths? Did you come across any of that in
Probably
research?
the story of Theseus.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we typically speak of Theseus in the labyrinth, defeating the Minotaur in the labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, he would not have had, the story goes that he pulled Ariadne's thread into the labyrinth, kind of Hansel and Gretel like with the breadcrumbs, so that he could follow his way out. If it was a labyrinth as we use the word, it would seem that there's no threat of being lost. But nevertheless, even if it was what we would call a maze, you see a suggestion of the labyrinth in that he takes the same path in and the same path out.
Right. And why is the path in and the path out being the same significant to a labyrinth?
Um, well, that would have to do with the images that come when you're walking it for religious, spiritual reasons. Um, um, Generally speaking, uh, there are images that come to mind as you go through those twists and turns. You cannot control them. Um, and um, and then when reversing the course will bring things to mind as well. So they work sort of in a complementary fashion for when you ultimately exit the labyrinth.
Right. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about my own experience with labyrinths, and it's interesting that you bring up Theseus and Ariadne in our Shadow Seekers membership back in the very beginning when we started in 2022. I did lead a ritual with Ariadne. It was the focus on Ariadne. And this particular ritual was about exploring the untruths that people tell. And so there's this idea in the myth, and for those who don't know the myth of Theseus and Ariadne, she fell in love with Theseus. But why was Theseus condemned to die or walk the labyrinth? I can't remember that part of the story.
My own memory fails.
Maybe a viewer knows.
Maybe they do. But if I recall correctly, like many a classic hero, he had a series of improbable tasks
Right.
that he had
That he had
to
to complete.
accomplish.
Yeah.
Among them, killing the Minotaur.
Right. So Ariadne had fallen in love with Theseus, and rather than see him killed potentially in this labyrinth with the Minotaur, she gave him a thread that he could take into the labyrinth and then bring back out. And in part of the way that we looked at her, is she's somebody who was forced to say untruths or thread stories that were not true to her father, to the people. And so what we had people do in a meditative state was sort of imagine themselves going into this labyrinth, contemplating their own untruths that they might say for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes we say untruths because we're lying to people or deceiving them, but sometimes we are protecting them or protecting ourselves. And so people sort of contemplated their own way that they're untruthful in their lives as they went into the labyrinth, and then they contemplated as they came out, what they would do about that, like how it would change their perspective as they came out of the labyrinth. So that was one way that we've used a labyrinth. And what's interesting is Tippy's going to talk about some physical ones he's actually traveled to. He's going to tell you guys how you can find some near you. But a lot of my experience of working with labyrinths is all mental. So it is possible to work with a labyrinth even if you don't have a physical one nearby.
That's right.
Right. So let me see here. What is our next question? Why don't you tell us about other types of labyrinths? So you talked about the one in France. Right. So tell us about different types of labyrinths.
Well, they've, I believe the oldest that we know of dates from approximately 4,000 years ago.
Okay.
But there are reasons to believe there are labyrinths even older. Many would argue, and I, based on my limited knowledge of what this means, I would agree it's an archetype. It does seem that people see a labyrinth, whether it's in the ground or on a wall or a book, and they know what to do.
Okay.
And they find it relaxing. Part of, as I understand it, the argument that the labyrinth is archetypal is it's a pattern constantly reoccurring in nature. You'll see it in the horizon, the sea currents, the tempest, the intestines of humans or any animals, the mother's womb.
Yeah.
So it seems to be deep in our psyche,
Mm-hmm.
and possibly all animals.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so that's how long they've been with us.
Right.
They've been built of many materials and in many designs. So today we typically know the round
Mm-hmm.
pattern, if not the Chartres model, which seems to be the most common. The second most common in our age is the Cretan model,
Okay.
but that too is a circular
Interesting.
winding around.
How
the
do
Ro-
the two how do they differ?
The Chartres model, the major breakthrough, so it's divided into four quadrants,
Mm-hmm.
basically. But you wind in and out, back and forth.
I see.
The Cretan model, you really just go in a circle.
I see.
And
Okay.
and there's a little break, but basically
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of wandering
Right.
back and forth between the quadrants.
Mm-hmm.
Chartres takes you on a very twisty
Interesting. Yeah.
path.
Yeah.
But the Romans,
Mhm.
built labyrinths. It was a very common pattern that they put in floors
Uh-huh.
in mosaic,
Uh-huh.
and they were typically laid out in a square
Mm.
or rectangular pattern, and in very Roman fashion. It worked very methodically. You finish quadrant one,
Uh-huh.
you move to quadrant two,
Uh-huh.
then you move to quadrant
Uh-huh.
three, then you move to quadrant four,
Right.
then you enter the center,
Interesting.
and then you work your way back out.
Uh-huh. And did they serve different purposes, the different shapes, or?
Truthfully, I don't think there's any
Yeah.
way of knowing.
Yeah, okay.
Even in the Middle Ages, when there was a flowering of labyrinths built in cathedrals and
Mhm.
churches, even then, curiously, there's really no writing left.
Interesting. Yeah. And you had mentioned earlier when we were discussing this finger labyrinths outside of churches
Mhm.
or at the doorways, and what
Yeah.
were those used for?
So the oldest that we know of, I believe, is found in Lucca in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
at the Cathedral of San Martino, and it's about 18 inches in diameter, and at the western entrance to the cathedral, which is almost always the main entrance.
Oh,
To the
the
cathedral.
western. Okay.
So there may be multiple entrances, but the main one
Mm-hmm.
typically is the western entrance. And in the pillar, right beside the central door, is this 18-inch labyrinth, and you're to trace it with your finger as you head into the cathedral. Now again, no written records,
Uh-huh.
but the conjecture is it helped center the mind.
Yeah.
You would trace the path, about like today when you enter a church, there's the holy
Mhm,
water thing.
mhm.
It's a way of focusing. Interestingly, this labyrinth is opposite a relief of the fall of Adam
Oh,
and
really?
Eve,
How interesting.
which would suggest back to the question of why you turn around in a labyrinth and
Yeah.
work your way out. If you've fallen or you're lost in sin,
Uh-huh.
big issue in churches, just turn around and get out of it. So
Sure.
that's part of the thing. There was a
Interesting.
bit of method in why they arranged
Yeah.
the labyrinth here, the fall there.
How interesting.
So though labyrinths are so old, they certainly predate Christianity.
Uh-huh.
They possibly even predate Judaism.
Yeah.
But they were also so common
Uh-huh.
that Christianity used them, and to our purposes,
Right.
in our part of the world today, kept it alive.
Right. Interesting. So what is the oldest labyrinth? Do we know?
The one, I believe, approximately 4,000 years old.
4,000 years old.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
At least
one-
that's the oldest we know
That
of.
one's in Ireland, and I
Oh.
believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe there's an even older one in Siberia.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So why don't you tell us? I know that people are wondering where perhaps they can find labyrinths. Labyrinths. So where are the physical labyrinths located, or how would a person find
Yeah.
one?
Chances are, if you're in the United States or Western Europe, you can pretty easily find one.
Okay.
I would recommend go to your Google machine and look up Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And that is where Lauren Artris, I believe she's retired now, but she was the canon of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And she's the one who really, she took a trip to Chartres in 1991 with the goal of bringing a labyrinth to Grace Cathedral.
Oh, okay.
And theirs is an exact replica of the Chartres labyrinth. And anyway, out of her work and her congregation's work, a lot of labyrinth supporting organizations began. Veriditas is one of them. They work closely also with the spirituality. If you recognize the word Veriditas, they work very closely with Hildegard of Bingen and her spirituality, which was a very nature-based, very feminine, particularly in her images of God. And also, I mean, Hildegard's another topic for another day, because she was brilliant like nobody's business. But with Grace Cathedral, another thing that grew out was this website, and you'll find it with Grace Cathedral, the Labyrinth Locator. And as the name implies, you just enter your state or province, wherever you are, and it will pull up labyrinths in the area. Here in Massachusetts, we have 117.
Wow.
And that's simply what's known to the Labyrinth Locator. I mean, I would stress, the number's probably much bigger. This is simply, this is whether it's a church or a town square. There's even a mall. Libraries that build labyrinths. And basically what you find in the Labyrinth Locator is someone built a labyrinth and they reported it to the Labyrinth Locator. So who knows how many people have actually built them, and the Labyrinth Locator is not aware.
Doesn't even know.
But anyway, go to Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and by there you can go to the Labyrinth Locator. And I'm very sure if you're in the United States, Canada, Western Europe, you will find a labyrinth.
And could people find, they could just go to Labyrinth Locator? They could probably Google that?
Yeah, you can probably look it up directly.
Okay, cool. And how about this, you took us to a labyrinth earlier this week.
Yes, I did.
Unfortunately,
It
we were
was
not able
snowed
to
over.
see it. But tell us about that one. How did you discover that?
That is a labyrinth here in Boston. For those familiar with Boston, it's right at Quincy Market and the entrance to the north end. So it's in the middle of a very busy highway, in the median, and it's the Armenian Heritage Park. I have reached out to the Armenian Heritage Society. I wanted to know, why is there a labyrinth?
Right,
It's not unusual to see labyrinths as memorials to the dead. Their ancient practice, quick aside, in the ancient world, it does seem that labyrinths were often used in connection to death.
Oh, interesting.
A way to trap the dead. A way to keep them from coming back among the living. But anyway, and while the thinking might be different in modern times, and certainly in a Christian tradition, it's not unusual to see a labyrinth in a memorial capacity. So I'm assuming that's what it's doing
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the Armenian
Yeah.
Heritage Park. I do know that the one at Boston College was built as a memorial to Boston College alums who died in 9/11.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And
So it was built more recently,
Mhm.
within the past 2 decades.
it
Okay.
was built, I think, in 2005,
Okay.
shortly after
Interesting.
9/11.
Yeah.
And at Boston College, you'll see surrounding the labyrinth, their names are in plaques, the names of the alums.
Uh-huh.
And when you keep in mind that 9/11 happened in 2001, and you see someone's name, class of 99,
Yeah.
it's a very, well, it's gloomy.
Sure. Yeah.
I've got to say that walking the labyrinth at BC, it's a beautiful experience.
Uh-huh.
And that's important because we can't run away from this stuff.
Right.
But I will say that the BC labyrinth conjures up a lot of feelings of grief,
Yeah.
regret,
Right.
sadness.
Right.
And I've noticed when I watch people walk it, you almost always see a very somber look on their face.
Yeah, interesting. I think the only physical labyrinth that I know of, other than the one you tried to take us to on Monday, is one at Forest Hills in Los Angeles at a cemetery.
Okay.
So it makes sense that you're talking about them having a connection to the dead. Our coven years ago went there just as a way to walk it and contemplate, but now it makes sense that it would be located in a cemetery. So what's the most interesting thing that you learned about labyrinths in your most recent studies?
Well, I would think it would be that there's truly no limit to what you can do with a labyrinth. There are no rules. There basically are no rules. Now, that's not to say, like your coven had a specific ritual, a specific meditation people were doing, and people do that. But you're using it by yourself, you're using it on your own. You might go in there meditating on something.
Yeah.
You might be doing something like a sacred reading. There might be a story from sacred text that you meditate on as you wind your way in and then you wind your way out. And sometimes that motion can really bring things to life.
Right.
Particularly if it's a story with a little bit of journey
I see.
involved.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But it can also be just go in there and sort of invite the images as they come to you. It might also be, as I've done lately, an exercise in walking meditation where you're walking the labyrinth, but I'm really just focusing on my footsteps and seeing what happens. So I think the thing I liked most was, because if you walk a labyrinth often, there's no one approach that's going to work for you. You're going to want many approaches. And it was also, no two people have the same experience on the labyrinth.
Right.
And nor should they. And because you're going to get out of it, whether it's good or bad, you're going to get out of it what you're bringing. You're going to understand thoughts and images that come to you according to where you are at the moment. And it was interesting walking the one at Armenian Heritage Park near Quincy Market, because that's a very busy area. So anytime I walk that labyrinth, people would join me. And it's based on the Chartres model, so there are 4 quadrants, which you can't see under the snow. And I would be walking. I would walk methodically, following the rules. And an older woman one day saw me walking, so she started walking. But interestingly, what she did, she had her cane, and yet she was very fast about it. She would walk a circuit or two in this quadrant, And then she would just walk over to that one and walk a circuit. And then she would walk over to that one and walk. So she was not, and at no point did she enter the center.
Huh.
She just did a line or two in each quadrant, not in order, and then she left. And I found that kind of funny, actually. And then these kids, about two brothers, one about 8, one about 10, they just started running like it was a race.
Oh, really?
And if you think of the labyrinth, though, as a metaphor for life,
Yeah.
There's what I'm doing
Uh-huh.
in the middle of life.
Uh-huh.
There's what this old woman is doing,
Uh-huh.
somewhat closer to the end, perhaps.
Yeah.
And there's what the little kids are doing.
Yeah.
And it kind of made sense
Right.
in 3 major different phases of life how you approach this whole
Yeah.
business.
How neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that when you started walking, that others just kind of
Almost
joined you
always. If there's a
always.
crowd around, someone will join you.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit about visiting a Buddhist stupa in Sedona, and people would sit and just, and for those who don't know, a stupa is the embodiment, I guess, of the
That's
Buddha,
right.
and
That's right.
people will go there and they will walk it in a clockwise, I believe it's a clockwise motion that you walk it in, and you send prayers out to the world for peace. And there'll be people just sitting, watching the stupa, and then a person will get up and walk, and then others start to join. And it can be very meditative in a similar way to the labyrinth. So I'm wondering if you came across anything in your studies about modern pagan groups using labyrinths.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah. One common use, and this was mentioned specifically with a neopagan group, but I can see it being used by a lot of people, was as you work your way towards the center, meditating on death, and coming out of the center is rebirth.
Yeah.
So it's a death and reincarnation type
Yeah.
of reflection. And then, of course, you shared your story of using a bit of mythology.
Right.
That seems to be something multiple religions have in common. So pagans might walk the labyrinth thinking of myth. Likewise, Christians will walk the labyrinth thinking of myth. You know, wandering through the desert for 40 years.
Right.
Very labyrinthine image.
Right. Yeah.
The journey to Jerusalem, the journey to the cross and the resurrection. There's a lot of, it just seems, it speaks to death and rebirth.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I can also see using a labyrinth as a symbol, right, or a sigil or something to help a person connect to their higher self or their inner self or their unconscious, or maybe even tabletop labyrinths as a meditative tool for your shadow work, for example. Which reminds me, I'd almost forgotten about this, but a long time ago, our coven actually made tabletop labyrinths out of Sculpey clay as an activity, and in fact, that particular meeting, there were some students from UCLA who had come to observe a coven, and that happened to be what we were doing that day, and then they wrote an article about it. But people really enjoyed making these, and then later, using them as a meditative tool. Now, I'm also wondering if you came across any, are there deities that are associated with labyrinths?
Oh, most definitely. Now, most of what I know, because of what I studied, is in a Christian context. But the labyrinth is seen as very feminine, particularly the Chartres model, the round model. The middle of the labyrinth is known by multiple names, one of which is the rosette.
Okay.
And at Chartres, no one quite understands why, but it's surrounded by these cup-like
Okay.
shapes. They're called lunettes.
Uh-huh.
They perhaps correspond to cycles of the moon.
I was wondering with the name.
Yeah, and
Right.
Chartres, to anyone familiar with Chartres and the Middle Ages, was, many cathedrals were, but Chartres in particular was very, very dedicated to the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
And so there is something very feminine
Yeah.
about the labyrinth. It also, I quite love this image. It's almost exhaustive, though, how many goddesses you're going to pull up.
Right.
But the mother spider image of God, because the spider, think of the labyrinth here, the spider spins a web from the substance of her own body, and lives in this web that she has created of her own self, and will birth her young or hatch her young in her web, and of course then they eat her. So you kind of see this theme running in the myth of many deities.
Right.
And when you walk the labyrinth, you know, you kind of have the feeling like you're walking into the goddess.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, your life is sustained by the goddess.
Yeah.
And so she's everything without and within. And yeah, it's a very it conjures up all kinds of deities.
Right. Yeah.
But on the subject of sigil, you mentioned sigils, and that made me think of protection. Another interesting use the labyrinth had in ancient times was Scandinavian sailors would make labyrinths out of stone near their ports, and supposedly they would walk it for protection.
How interesting.
Before their voyage.
How interesting. Oh, let's check the comments and see if we have any questions about labyrinths. This is why I didn't check them earlier, is we're on a different Wi-Fi. Okay, here we go. Now I can see. Sometimes I can't see the comments at first. I see some others have joined us since I said hello earlier. Andrea's with us, and Amy, and Tabitha, Pamela, Cindy, Glitter's here, Tracy. Hi, everybody. Cindy said she feels like she's always on a twisted path.
Yes.
Kurt's got a question. He said, did the pyramids in Egypt or Valley of the Kings have anything to do with the labyrinth?
Yeah, the pyramids do have this labyrinthine pattern as you work your way towards typically towards the tomb. And again, it just seems to be a go-to image.
Yeah.
That you know, it's very likely that the people who made who knows, but it's likely that the people who made the pyramids didn't think, let's build a labyrinth. But part of that being an archetype, it's sort of the go-to thing.
Right.
And likewise, if you think of literature about death, classic ancient literature, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Dante, the Divine Comedy, there are these circles that you walk. The beautiful Hindu and Buddhist, the wheel of life and the wheel of reincarnation. It's the go-to.
Right. It's always
for
a circle.
death and rebirth.
Yeah. How interesting.
Oh, I should mention too, Theseus and the Minotaur. Even in the Christian Middle Ages, that was the most common image depicted in the center of a labyrinth.
Oh, interesting.
In the Middle Ages, Theseus became a kind of Christ-like figure who went into the middle of the labyrinth to defeat the Minotaur obviously
Yeah.
what he stood for.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so so Theseus and the Minotaur are obviously
Yeah.
connected to the labyrinth,
Yeah.
and then later, centuries later, with a Christian overlay.
Uh huh. Yeah. Interesting. Well, we're gonna move into the Q&A portion now. Like Glitter said here, Labyrinth is one of the
Yes,
female
yes.
mysteries. Yeah, very much connected to the divine feminine.
That's right.
I see Sabrina's with us too. Merry meet. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, we're gonna head into the Q&A now, and it can be about labyrinths. It can be about anything related to witchcraft, shadow work, or energy work. So while we're waiting for any questions that anybody has for us, I just thought we'd talk about what we did yesterday, because we know our audience is witches here, and we took a trip to Salem
did, yes.
yesterday and had a great time. I got to meet up with our dear friends Jenny and Trisha D, and disappointingly, much of Salem was closed on a Tuesday. We'll have to remember that for next time. But what did we do there? We went to some shops.
Some really nice shops. Lot of interesting books in these shops, and had some very good food and some good beer. And
Oh yeah, that's right. Played trivia.
Played trivia.
Almost won.
Almost won, but
We won second place in trivia. I got a brand new pentacle here. And then this was a highlight of my day, at least. We went to Lori Cabot's shop.
that's right.
And Lori Cabot has a bowl of various tarot and oracle cards, and they have little meanings, little fortunes written on the back of them, and you're told to kind of close your eyes and center yourself and think of an intention and then draw a card. And so I ended up drawing the 10 of Cups. Very beautiful card, and then it has this little fortune on the back. So that was kind of a highlight for us, and just seeing friends and being in Salem. It was about 12 degrees, but
It was chilly.
We weathered through it and had a great time. But also thinking about the future, I know a lot of people have asked me about taking trips eventually for the group, and we do have a trip to Salem in the works at some point in the future. And what we noticed when we were down there too, but much of it was closed, but there is now a broom making
That's right.
shop.
I
Right.
want to go back to that.
I know, right? When it's open. And I was thinking, what a fantastic idea to take some witches to Salem for Body Mind Witchcraft and make brooms and a lot of other fun activities we can do down there. But let's see, do we have any questions for us here?
I should say too, on the subject of a trip,
Yes.
one of the things that happens when you walk a labyrinth a lot, if it becomes a daily or almost daily practice, is you start to see how life follows this labyrinthine pattern. So we all worked our way to Salem, and we worked our way back.
Yeah.
And here you are talking about it. There are blessings you found, insights you had, things you found, fun you had.
Right.
And even a less fun day, you get up, you go to work, you come back home. There's this go there, come back pattern. And this, little by little, you start to see, wow, it's all a labyrinth. Life itself is a labyrinth.
You're right. Yeah.
But whether it's on a day-to-day basis or the big picture of life.
Right. It could be a theme for life, right? Life is a labyrinth.
And just as on the labyrinth, like if we walked a labyrinth together right now, we would have different thoughts, insights, lessons, different experiences, be they good or bad or somewhere in between. And your day-to-day life is like that too. And life is like that. We're in the same place, but we're getting different things out of it.
Right, right. I suppose too, every time that you just like every part of your life is different. Every time you come to a labyrinth, even if you come to the same one multiple times, it's a different experience every time.
I have never walked the same labyrinth twice.
Yeah, very cool. I see that Glitter said that she, so this is awesome. She's got so many new ideas to investigate.
Great.
That's what we were hoping. Yeah, it's really is, labyrinths really are a magical, a magical experience. And there's just definitely check out Labyrinth Locator, you said. I wonder if can we even look that up here?
Probably.
Labyrinth Locator, is that what it's called?
That's it.
Okay, let's see. Oh, see,
There it
here
is.
we found it.
Oh, okay. Labyrinthlocator.org.
Okay, so we're going to drop that in. For those who are live, we're just going to drop that in the chat for you right now. So you can go ahead and put in your zip code or any zip code you want to know about and find out if there are any close to you. I know in Arizona, I've read about there are some there. So I know, I'm sure that in every state you'll be able to find some. I know we have Canadian viewers and we have viewers from other parts of the world. I'm sure that they also can find some near them. But if anything, there's always the option of the tabletop labyrinths.
That's right. You can even find them on Amazon.
Really?
Yeah, you can buy them.
Really? Buy them?
Yeah.
Go figure. I think you could probably find jewelry, different things with them written on them. Yeah. Okay, so any questions for us? I'm just checking our chat. Glitter said she's really surprised. She said, I just thought I knew something about them. Yeah, it's always so interesting when, you kind of take a deeper dive into things. You learn a lot of stories and a lot of history that you didn't know before.
Yeah, there's the thing that's so great about the labyrinth is there really is no limit to what you can get out of it.
Right.
And being realistic, if it becomes a regular thing you do, and if it is a regular thing you do, I'm sure you know this. Some walks are better than others.
Yeah.
There will be a walk you don't get much out of.
Right.
There will be that question you're grappling with and you don't get much of an answer. But this is something I read in Lauren Artress's book on labyrinths, Walking a Sacred Path, one of the, probably the big book on labyrinths in today's world.
Yeah.
And that is, life's answers are not always simple.
Yeah.
So they just don't always come the first time.
Yeah.
So I've discovered that too,
Right.
with some questions and problems walking the labyrinth.
Right.
It takes multiple walks.
Right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden,
There it is.
you might be in the labyrinth when it comes. It might be later in your day,
Yeah.
outside the labyrinth, because after a while, life starts to work like a labyrinth.
Right.
And someone says something, or someone does something, or you step on an acorn, and you're like, aha, there it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely, people ask me a lot about meditation. People have trouble with meditating, and I always talk about the walking meditation. But I think that a labyrinth, if you can find one in Labyrinth Locator, and especially if you're somebody who's had trouble meditating, try to take your thoughts, your problems to the labyrinth and see what transpires. Yeah.
A very simple meditation technique is something I learned very recently. It's and I would imagine many of you already know about it. It's walking meditation. And all it means is this: when you walk, think about nothing. Just be aware of your footsteps. Nothing else. Now, easier said than done very often.
Yeah.
But you keep coming back to your footsteps and you just focus on them. Now that can be very hard to do. But Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book called very simply How to Walk, he recommends, he did this with a flight of stairs at his house. He made a promise to the flight of stairs that when I walk up or down, I'm only going to think about walking and nothing else. I, of course, live on the fourth floor of this building without an elevator. And I know realistically, I am not going to walk up and down the stairs every single day, multiple times a day, and think about nothing but walking. But I did promise the Labyrinth at Harvard Divinity School that when I walked it, I would focus just on the steps and nothing else. So you could use it that way too. Just focus on your steps. And it's amazing, even just for a minute or two, if you can do it for a minute or two, it is amazing how much peace it brings.
Yeah. Oh, great. What a great idea. So find a labyrinth on Labyrinth Locator. Try that out and let us know how it goes. So we're going to be closing up here in just a bit, but if you have any questions, put them in the chat for us. If you're watching back later in replay, you can also put questions in the chat, and we'll go back through later and we'll answer any questions that you guys have, anyone who's in replay. While I'm waiting just to see if there's any final questions for us about anything related to witchcraft, shadow work, energy work, or labyrinths, I'm just going to let you know what's coming up. So next week we'll be back to our Tuesday lives, Tuesday at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. So on 1/28, we're moving into Imbolc season. So we're going to be celebrating Imbolc. That will be our episode on Tuesday, 1/28, and it'll give you some ideas on what you can do as you move into Imbolc season. For those who are local to the Los Angeles area, my coven, Coven of Midnight's Flame, will be hosting a in-person Imbolc ritual on February 1st at the Crooked Path shop in Burbank. So if you are local, there are still tickets available for that, and you can check that out at the Crooked Path's website. For those who are not local, which is most of you, we will also be having an online Imbolc ritual on 2/8, and it will be the same, it will be the online version of the ritual that we do in person. This is our traditional Imbolc elemental vows ritual, where you'll have a chance to communicate and commune and connect to all of the elements and figure out parts of your life that you would like to change, what you'd like to bring into your life as we move into Imbolc season. And you'll have a chance to write some elemental vows that are going to help guide you for this next part of the Wheel of the Year. So look for more information on our online ritual coming soon. It's free to all of those who are in our Shadow Seekers membership and our Coven of Midnight's Flame. But if you aren't in either of those groups, you'll be invited to join us too, and you'll be able to get a ticket through a donation. So just watch for that soon. We'll have the advertisements up and the info up for that very soon. All right. Any final questions for us? We're going to check the chat now. And that's so Peggy said off topic, but she said, I love your tank top. Where is it from? And then she also said UCSB, so that would be University of California, Santa Barbara, has a labyrinth.
Oh,
very
excellent.
cool.
Excellent.
So Peggy, you can go walk it then.
Yeah.
That's cool. So my shirt is actually from Pagan Pride Los Angeles. And this was their logo from this most recent year. I think it's their 25th anniversary. So they did shirts, and I got that when I was teaching at Los Angeles Pagan Pride this year. Glitter said she's thinking of the image of a labyrinth against shadow work. You mean is working with an image of labyrinth in your shadow work? I think that's an excellent idea, especially if you're. A lot of times with our shadow work, we know there are issues somewhere, but we don't know where they come from. And I think a labyrinth could be a very great way to meditate as you're trying to contemplate where your
definitely.
shadow, where some of those issues are coming from. Sabrina says, just curious, do they still have King Richard's Fair up here?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. In the fall, in September into October.
Cool. Chris said corn mazes are a big thing around him in the fall. Yeah.
Yes.
In
fact, there's a Hopi, legend of the man in the maze.
Okay.
And the story is, if I recall correctly, he is working his way towards the middle, Again, some confusion. Is it really a maze or a labyrinth?
Okay.
Kind of like the Theseus story.
Yeah.
But it's called The Man in the Maze. And as he works his way to the middle, that's when the sun god agrees to take him to the next life.
Oh, interesting.
In reward for his work well done, but he has to find his way back out.
How interesting.
And so as he finds his way back out, he basically ascends.
And the setting of that was a corn maze.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's so many connections that we can make. Let's see here. Sometimes I think I can't see because people are talking about, Chris said, just please no David Bowie. I don't know the reference.
Oh, Labyrinth.
Oh,
Labyrinth, the movie. Yeah.
Why did I put two and two together? Okay, there you go. It's late. And it's about 95 degrees in the,
It is
apartment
very
right
hot in
now.
here. Yeah.
We cannot control the heat. It's like 12 degrees outside, and but in here it's like 95. So I'm a little hot. Yeah, very cool. Okay, well, it was so great spending time with you guys as always. I love, tonight it's Wednesday night, not Tuesday night, but I always love these times together. And it was so great to have Tippy with us. And he is an expert on many things.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll be able to have him join us in the future to discuss
Sure.
more of your wisdom with us.
Yeah,
Yes.
discuss some other things. Yeah,
Right,
there we go.
right. Okay. Well, if we missed any of your questions or comments, we'll go back through the chat and check those out. Make sure to leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in the video. It helps us get it into the feed of more people. And if you are watching back on YouTube, on our Body, Mind, Witchcraft YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe, and that way you will not miss any future episodes. All right, until next time, blessed be.